Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome or welcome back to the Wilmac Wire. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, one of the things that I love most about being a host of the Wilmac Wire, where I get to chat with people weekly, is that everyone has a very different story of how they got there, especially in the 911 center space, which, if you haven't noticed, we've been speaking to more 911 center leaders lately. The theme is commonly that they didn't plan it. They didn't grow up saying, this is what I want to do. But yet here they are. They're decades in. They're still passionate. They're still showing up. And today's guest is a perfect example of that. Today, we're sitting down with Nick LaMontia, GIS Manager at Kerr Emergency 911 in Kerrville, Texas. So sorry, my best take at a Texas accent. But Nick is also the Southeastern Director on the NENA Board of Directors. Nick just celebrated his 30th anniversary in the 911 space, which is no small feat. Here's what you can expect to hear out of today's episode. Of course, we start things off with Nick's career journey, which we spend a really good chunk of time on. He started as a housekeeper in Estes Park, Colorado, moved on to being a dispatcher, and now he's within national NENA leadership. And we discuss kind of how each stop along the way shaped him and the intricacies that differentiated each PSAP experience. We took a dive into GIS, or Geographic Information System, and why it matters more than most people realize in the context of NG911 and the future of emergency communications. Nick gave us a bit of a glimpse into what his day-to-day looks like as a GIS manager at a smaller agency. We discussed his experience on the NENA Board of Directors and the issues that are top of mind right now for NENA leadership, including things like NG911 funding, which, like I mentioned, is very pertinent to Nick in his role. And of course, we get a great take on what keeps someone motivated and passionate in this field for 30 years, like I just talked about at the beginning, at the top of this intro. So, great episode for you to listen to today. Thank you so much to Nick for joining us on the pod. We'll see you in person at NENA 2026 at the end of June. Let's get into today's episode of the Wilmac Wire. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Wilmac Wire. I'm Emily Miller, joined by my co-host, Steve McDonnell. On this show, we talk with the drivers, the leaders, innovators, and decision makers pushing customer interaction technology and AI forward. And because we're proud to call Western New York home, we also spotlight the drivers in our own community, the people and organizations shaping growth and innovation right here. Let's get into it. All right, we'll get started by introducing our guest today for the Wilmac Wire. He is joining us from Kerrville, Texas. He's been rooted in the public safety space for nearly 30 years, starting his career as a dispatcher in Colorado. He made the trek to Texas, where he spent the last 20 plus years working in public safety. Besides being a manager in his own PSAP, he's also stepped into national public safety leadership through NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, where he spent 7 years on the NENA Institute board, including 2 years as president. He now currently is the GIS manager at Kerr Emergency 911 and serves as the Southeastern Director on the NENA Board of Directors. Welcome to the Wilmac Wire, Nick LaMontia.
Thank you very much.
Nick,
I,
thanks
I, I
for
will
joining us.
correct one thing, though, and there's
Okay.
no way you could have possibly known this. But last month, I actually had my 30th anniversary
30th.
in the 911 business,
Wow.
you want to call it. So it's been a long time.
Congratulations.
That's impressive.
wonderful.
Thank you. Still happy, still motivated.
So to say, we'll dig into that. Don't worry. All right, Nick, before we dig into kind of today's question topics, we always like to start with a brief icebreaker that we call this or that. So I have 3 questions for you. I'm going to give you 2 options to choose from in each question, and then you can explain why. Very easy, very lighthearted.
Are they easy to remember, or do I need to take notes?
No, you should not have to take
Okay.
notes.
All
And
right.
if you need it repeated, I will repeat
Okay.
it for you. Don't worry.
Fire away.
Okay. First one, Texas summers or Texas winters?
Texas winters, hands down.
Yeah.
Only because I was raised for a long time in Colorado, and
Mhm.
I'm much more comfortable in the snow and the ice and the cold and the wind. So even though we don't get that a ton down here, I do savor it, the brief moments we do get it. So hands down, Texas winter.
That was a quick answer.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't even need to think about that one. Give me a tough one.
Okay. All right. I don't know if I'll have any tough ones for you. Just to warn you. Okay. Next one, more NENA related, but 911 goes to Washington event or the NENA annual conference.
I would have to say annual only because it's more of a well-rounded event, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
GTW is so target specific. You're there for one purpose. National not only touches on legislation and GTW kind of stuff, it's also about education. It's also
Hmm.
about wellness. It's also about uh, all the items that are important to Nina. You get to touch on all of those as opposed to being specific about what you're after. So I'd have to say annual.
Yeah, that makes sense. We were just chatting before the call that we'll likely see you in person
Oh,
at
absolutely.
NENA
Yeah, I'll be there.
2026 soon. So excited for that. Okay, last one. I pulled this specifically from your bio, so it's a little bit more personal, but um,
What did I
going
what did I put on there? Okay. All right.
going to a concert or a quiet night with a puzzle.
Okay. So once upon a time it would have been concert.
Hmm.
And this is I'll even tell you a funny story related to this. I have been a musician for years and years and have been to a million different concerts to the point where it has ruined my hearing. Now, and that's actually part of why I'm not wearing a headset now is because this ear is shot and I can't dedicate just one ear to hear the rest of the room.
Mhm.
Never wore a headset when I was in dispatch for that reason. But the
Wow.
funny part was when I finally went to go get my hearing tested, I think it was before I went to HPD, the frequency that they found I couldn't hear was it fit perfectly with the timbre of a woman's voice, which helps out tremendously at home to this day, because I just need, oh, no, no, I didn't hear you say that, or I have no memory of that happening, whether it actually happened or not.
Yeah.
So these days, not to mention I'm not a huge fan of the crowds and the
Yeah,
noises and smelling
fair.
everybody's hot dogs and all that other kind of stuff. At this point, I would much rather be at home doing a puzzle, cranking my own music than sharing
Yeah.
that moment with 500 to 5,000 other people. That's the very
Completely fair.
long answer you probably weren't expecting.
No, I love it. I like the explanation. I always want them to spur conversation. So
I'm sorry,
that
did you say something? I couldn't hear.
that's a good one. That's a
No,
really good.
you guys are cranked up pretty high here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nick, for humoring us and doing our icebreaker that we like to call this or that. So hopefully our audience knows you a little bit better now. Okay, we're gonna kick things off with kind of our first theme that we always like to hit on with our guests, which is on career journey. So we'd love if you'd tell us a little bit more about your background and how you ended up in emergency communications, and then on top of that, how you ended up specializing in GIS.
Well, those were two completely separate accidents.
Mm,
Uh, where 911 started for me, I had no intention to be a dispatcher. It wasn't what I dreamt of being as a kid. Everybody wants to be a fire. Actually, I think I wanted to be a stunt man as a kid. Police work never crossed my mind. But I started in a very small town in Colorado called Estes Park, Colorado. 5,000 year-round people at the time. Excuse me. And I was a housekeeper, but I was planning on getting married soon, and I was looking for a job that paid well and had benefits. Those were my two criteria was all that mattered. Had no aspirations other than that. And in a small town, you've got very few positions that will afford you that. So I applied for the position, and here's another story since I've already overshared. Years before that, I was a radio DJ. And when it came to apply for the PD job to be a dispatcher, the rumor was the only reason they hired me instead of the person I was running against is because I knew I had been a DJ, so I wasn't going to be afraid of the microphone.
mm,
So that just spur of the moment decision on their part is still playing out 30 years later,
Wow.
which I find astounding. But fortunately for me, once I got into the dispatch sphere, I ended up loving it. And I realized that that was what I was meant to be. There
Hmm.
was problem solving, there was helping out, there was the feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. And again, that's carried for 30 plus years. The GIS portion of it was another complete accident though, because at the time I had been in dispatch for pretty close to 20 years. And this was here locally in Kerrville, and our emergency 911 network was going to be doing some organizational reshuffling and needed a GIS guy. Well, I had no experience in GIS, but I had had enough contact with them through their coming in and servicing the equipment and updating our maps, that kind of stuff, that they must have seen something in me. I'm assuming a potential to be a blank slate, and they could teach me how to do their stuff. But they also specifically wanted somebody who would have that dispatch perspective. They knew that they wanted somebody. Well, they realized that dispatchers were basically their clients, their customers.
Mm.
So the way they were presenting the GIS component needed to make sense to dispatchers. So they knew they wanted to bring a dispatcher in to do the GIS thing. And oddly enough, they offered me the job in August, and I had to keep it secret until February when I
Oh
was
my God.
actually able to come on board. So again, I had no intention of being a GIS person, um, but it was. I think at the time it was important for me to step away because I still love dispatching. I really felt like I was going out at the top of my game after
Mm.
being almost solely on night shift and missing the birthdays and missing the weekends and the holidays and that kind of stuff. It was time to go to something, as long as it was still dispatch related, which the way they presented to me, it was. So I really lucked out and got the best of all worlds by being able to come over and do this and learn something new in the process.
So going back to the beginning, Estes Park, you're in the mountains there,
Oh, absolutely.
like the legit mountains.
Oh,
How was that? And there's got to be different types of calls coming in versus when you were in Houston or even Kerrville.
oh, it was an entirely different animal. There would be shifts where nothing would happen, and then there would be shifts where everything would happen because you'd get a multitude of accidents, or you would have some kind of medical call that would you would need to implement specific apparatus to get to them. You would have Estes is weird in the sense that as I think I said, the year-round population at the time was about 5,000 people, but during the summer, because it's a tourist town, the population grows to the thousands upon thousands.
Mhm.
Especially during a big event like the 4th of July, there's
Yeah.
I may be guessing here, but I'm assuming 100,000 people, if not more, in
Wow.
town.
Wow.
So you have to stay pretty flexible. Um, but going to an HPD or a Houston PD or League City, every agency obviously has their own specific things going on. What I loved about Esses was it was very isolated. It was very
Yeah.
quiet. And I don't think I did puzzles at the time, but if I did,
That
I
would have
would have
been a
had
good.
fun doing them because nobody would have bothered me.
Yeah.
Did
Oh,
you
that's
grow up in Estes?
The important years
Yeah.
were in Estes. I
Mhm.
actually was raised before that in Omaha
Okay.
and moved to Estes my sophomore year, before my sophomore year of high school. So all the important growing up
Yeah.
was done up there, and then moved away after my son was born. So
Okay.
all the important stuff happened while I was in Estes.
So not to get too specific, but it's very for me, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
What about when calls came in? I'm sure you'd get lost people
Oh,
hiking
absolutely.
or skiing where they shouldn't be. How was locating them and getting people out there? I mean, that's got to be a whole different dynamic.
The only difference to your perception, and I don't know if this is anything you could possibly know, but the bulk of at least the popular hiking trails in that area actually belong in Rocky Mountain National Park. which Estes Park butts up against. They're always referred to as the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park.
Okay.
So if there was ever a lost hiker, generally it was happening in the park, and they have their own dispatch. We would actually, we used to call it masking, but we would cover for them at night because they would go home.
Okay.
And this was before, or at least at the very beginning of the cell phone prevalence. So it wasn't. I, I don't want to sound prehistoric, but honestly, pre-cell phone, somebody got lost on a mountain or got, snow blind, whatever the case was.
Yeah.
They were kind of out of luck because they had
Yeah.
no way to contact anybody.
Yep.
So it was a slightly different dynamic back then. That's not to say that the park wouldn't ask for Estes Park's help on something like that, but it wasn't as common because there was honestly no way to get a hold of us. If you were up there and lost,
It is what it is. Yeah.
yeah,
You know that going into it.
yeah, I would hope so.
So that's interesting that the parks have their own PSAPs. Do you think they're larger now that they have that everyone has cell phones and people are actually calling into them?
I wouldn't think so. I actually still remember their radio. We call them Romo for Rocky Mountain National Park. They were, I honestly, I wouldn't have an idea. This is a complete assumption, but I wouldn't imagine that their footprint has gotten a lot bigger because there's no addition of trails that I know of. It's been the same for years and years. I would assume they could get along just fine running a 2-person show. Now you've got me curious. I wouldn't mind going up there and just knocking on the door and seeing how they run things these days.
Yeah, what's up? Nick, let me ask you, you touched on this a little bit, but what prompted that move from Colorado to Texas?
The first one was for family reasons.
Mhm.
My wife's whole family had moved up there. Actually, my wife's father was law enforcement. He retired from Houston PD and then moved up to Colorado, and was a sheriff's deputy up there. And I was actually one of his dispatchers.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
After I met his daughter and we got married. And then he retired and the whole family kind of gravitated back down here. We started around Houston, and then all ended up back here in Kerrville. And from a dispatch point of view, as long as you're fairly decent at your job, you could probably find a dispatch job anywhere. So I could be a dispatcher wherever I wanted to be.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And you touched on this a little bit kind of when we were introducing you, but what keeps you coming back to 911 emergency communications every day and staying in that field?
It, part of it is, and again, this is going back to what I was saying before. Part of it is about uh, being part of something bigger than I am individually, and being able to help people and being able to make a difference. Very specifically, and I kind of wish you could see around the room around me because it's covered in monitors. It's dark, just like dispatch used to be. That's part of the many things I loved about dispatch, but a big part of what it was I could come in, do my thing, help out, and then disappear. I love the anonymity of it, especially because I've made a habit for some reason of working in very small municipalities. I know that the officers can get recognized in public. They can be going to the store and somebody's going to recognize them and harass them or thank them. I don't want to say it's all bad stuff, but I've always enjoyed the man behind the curtain thing. I'm making things work. I'm solving the puzzles. I'm making the connections, and then I can just disappear, and nobody has any idea what I do.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it is kind of funny because in our emails back and forth prior, you were like, "We'll have to work on my lighting when we hop on here because it's dark." It's
Well,
dark.
and don't get me wrong. I am and always have been very proud of what I do.
Yeah.
But I also like there's a division for me.
Mhm.
It ends at 5. It picks
Yeah.
up again at 7 or 8. I have to have those divisions no matter if I'm in dispatch or GIS or doing board stuff. I need to have those divisions because the bleed over just drives me nuts.
Mhm. Yeah, completely
Be-
fair.
Before we move on, I know to the next theme, I just want to ask a question. So you had been in Estes Park, which you said it could be slow or it could be fast, but it's definitely smaller than Houston's, like one of the biggest cities in in the
Oh,
country.
absolutely.
So you went into like what I would assume is pretty chaotic environment with calls constantly 24/7 in Houston. How was that?
A couple of things about it. Number one, it was a beautiful place to work. It was the Houston Emergency Center. It had opened not
Nice.
long before I got there. Beautiful facility,
Yeah.
state of the art. The people were uniformly uh, gracious, and it was just a great team to work for. The issue I had, well, I guess I'll do the good part first. Coming from Estes, where, as I said, nothing could be happening or something could be happening. What they did at HPD, which is common to all or most dispatch centers, I would think, is the new kid always has to work the busy mics. So I'd be on West Side, or I'd be on trying to remember what else was busy. It's been 20 years, Southeast, something like that. But you were moving the entire time. You were busy the entire time. That place taught me speed. It taught me recognition. The downsides to it for me were it was only police dispatch. And I came from a background of I've heard it called TRICOM. You do police, fire, and
All
EMS. You do
three. Yep.
all of them. I felt like I could have been doing more in the sense that I was only doing police dispatch. The other and more important part for me was, and again, it's part of the smaller agency thing, is we were very much a family. I had a vested interest in my guys. We barbecued with each other. We went to each other's weddings. We were, we worked on each other's yards. It was you were invested in your people at the Hex Center. And if I've heard correctly, they've actually changed this since then. But it was a secure facility and no officers could come in. So I had no idea who I was dispatching for. I could communicate them or with them over our terminals, but I had no idea who they were. I couldn't pick them out of a crowd. They had no idea who I
Yeah.
was. That doesn't mean my concern for them was any less or that I cared for them any less, but uh my vested interest in them wasn't as much as it would be if I could actually meet them face to face. So when the opportunity came to go to League City, and I will say this was HPD's fault. It was their own fault because they sent me to a training. And somebody stood up in the middle of the training and said, "Hi, I'm Russell with League City PD. Just want to let everybody know we've got an opening. If you want to talk about it, come talk to me after class," which I did. And not only was it a smaller agency, but they were also a TRICOM, so they did it all. And I'll be the first to admit the money was pretty good. So I went and worked for League City, and that was an amazing few years. It was another family. Uh, the workload was great. It was, I mean, it was still shift work, but it was really like being back home again.
So a couple questions. I've heard from talking and being around a lot of PSAPs that what you're saying hits home, that it's very good for the dispatchers and call takers and the PSAP workers to know the cops, and the cops or the fire or EMS to understand what it's like to work in a PSAP
Oh,
too.
sure.
Because when the cops aren't allowed in there and have no idea a face, they are thinking what they're doing is number one all the time and just trying to ask for help constantly from a
Sure.
PSAP and not really understanding both sides and how it all works as one unit. So that makes sense when you say that these smaller places who get to know each other work a little smoother.
Oh, absolutely. And from a personal standpoint, excuse me, you you look forward to going to work more. I mean, I've still got guys that I worked with in Estes 30 years ago that I'm still friends with, and we still communicate and we still talk. And when you have those kinds of relationships, you do look forward to going to work more. Because those are your guys, and you can joke, and you got somebody to bring you lunch maybe, and you get tensed out if they're on a tense call. It really does become hopefully it becomes family for you.
And obviously with the amount of hours people spend at work, it's good that you want to look forward to it and not the
Yeah.
other way
Oh,
around.
absolutely. With Leak City, we had, I can't remember the name of the hurricane that came through, but everybody sequesters together, and you learn a lot about each other very quickly.
Yeah.
And same with our ice storms that we had up here when I was in dispatch. I worked a couple of 24s just because it wasn't safe to go home. So might as well just
Yeah.
stay put. I mean, you
Hmm.
want to doze off in front of somebody, you find out who your friends are really quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
When you went to Houston, is it like you said it's fast? Is it literally rapid? Like you get off the phone and boom, you're just on it again.
Well, and the phone part, it was a unique setup, and maybe one of the reasons I left again. But I was rarely on the phone. I was purely PD dispatch. So there were
Dispatch.
call
Okay.
takers, and then
Yep.
my pending queue would fill up. Then I'd have
Well,
all
you'd
these
have to.
calls. And some nights, and this sounds ridiculous to me in hindsight, but it was true. Say in Estes Park, I might have 2 or 3 units on a night. On a Friday night in Houston on West Side at the time, I would have upwards of 100 units on. And depending on what was going on, the extent of your radio traffic, unless it was some kind of in progress call, would be a unit saying, okay, give me 1, 2, 3, 4. You look up 1, 2, 3, 4 in your pending queue, you'd send it off to them to their MDTs, and that was the extent of your involvement. And that's what you were doing all night. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 4. Give me 5, 4, 6, 7. 10, 4, and that's what you were doing all night.
Wow.
And you would still have calls left over. It was crazy, but it was probably the most intense and productive learning experience I've had in my entire career. I wouldn't be where I am now without it.
Is League City and Kerrville pretty similar type of environments?
Not so much. League City was more, I suppose you could say urban, in the sense that it's kind of sandwiched roughly in between the south side of Houston and Galveston.
Yeah.
A lot of interstate traffic, a lot of affluent areas, um, very busy. Learned a lot there. Again, I can't say that I've ever had a bad experience in dispatch. It was a wonderful experience down there. Out here in Kerrville, much more rural. Um, Similar population, maybe. I think League City maybe takes the edge, but definitely more rural here. Not as and this isn't a dig at all, but it wasn't as technologically advanced. There was
Yeah.
actually some resistance to technology, anti-MDT, anti-card readers, that kind of stuff. They've since caught up, and they're definitely running with everybody else now. But it was also a different type of call. You would literally get livestock calls, cattle, goats in the road. A lot of interdiction type stuff on I-10, because I-10 comes right out of Mexico, and all the issues that are involved with that. So I would say that the traffic levels were similar, but they were just entirely different types of calls.
Hmm. Interesting. All right. Well, thanks for sharing about kind of your background, Nick, and what's brought you to today. We want to dig into GIS a little bit because with our previous public safety guests, kind of focused on the PSAP as a whole, but I wanna dig a little bit more into that. So for our listeners, GIS stands for Geographic Information System, and
Correct.
Nick, you are the GIS manager at Kerr Emergency 911. So for our listeners who might not be as familiar, can you explain kind of what GIS is and why it matters, and then kind of where it fits into that broader NG 911 context?
I could I could really start swimming in the details here. Um, and I'll probably upset a lot of GIS folks by simplifying it in this way. But as far as dispatch is concerned, location is everything, if not
Mhm.
almost everything. What GIS provides for dispatch, and here's where I get in trouble, is a map and all of the supporting information that can be gleaned from that map. It can be obviously it plots the location. We'll just say theoretically a 911 call. It will plot the location of that call on a map in a location where they can understand where it is within their jurisdiction, and will incorporate all kinds of useful information that would assist with that call, whether it's their road center line layers. It can be locations of utilities. You can have um, the direction of travel on those roads, or speed limits on those roads. Your response boundaries are, of course, extremely important, so you know who to even send to those calls.
Hmm.
It really provides the foundation on which dispatchers are able to build their response for any particular call.
Right. Okay. And so where does that fit in NG 911? Because I know NG 911 has been a common theme now. It's happening up in Canada. It's kind of happening state by state. But where does GIS fit into that greater context?
Where it's going to become even more important, and of course it was an important function before, but the way pre 911 or pre next gen 911 environment was, calls were transmitted over the old copper lines. I'm sure you've heard
Hmm.
that many times before. Because of the new way of transporting calls via IP, you now have the ability to send all kinds of additional data with that call, where that becomes very important to me personally and dispatch at large, is it can provide that much more information to inform a response. What's big for me right now is indoor mapping. Now, one of the key components that a lot of vendors in our industry are harping on is Z-axis information. And of course, everybody's heard of XY locations, but Z-axis gives you an elevation or a height above a
Right.
ellipsoid, which is semi-useful information. Say, it's 10 meters. Your Z-axis is 10 meters. Well, what does that mean? Where does that place you? With indoor mapping, which can either be stored locally, or it can be pulled from a cloud. I won't bore you with all the details, but with indoor mapping, you can actually provide a map of that location to your dispatchers and see exactly where that 10 meters is. What
Hmm.
floor does that place that call on? What room specifically in that building does that call now fall in? So it really um, not only streamlines but provides a better dispatchable location. And those are all components that couldn't have been excuse me, could not have been easily transmitted in dispatch over the old way of transmission. Now that we have next gen becoming more prevalent and you're able to transmit that additional information, that is, I think, where the future is going to be going.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's
Do you see AI getting involved in GIS and playing a part in the next
It
few years?
it definitely could. Not necessarily from my standpoint, and I guess I'll hit it in a different areas. One the GIS, and one the dispatch area. Luckily for me, my agency, and when I say GIS manager, I'm it's kind of a misnomer because I'm managing me, I guess. Um, but it's a small enough area that I can handle most everything myself.
Mhm.
Everything's, the addition of new address points, or drawing new roads, or changes to response boundaries. Those aren't outside of my abilities. I can definitely see AI playing a function with the bigger agencies, where maybe a little system with drawing footprints for buildings, or maybe the validation of their data. AI may help with that. The flip side of the same coin is, for our dispatch, I can definitely see AI playing a part as far as translation and transcription. I think that can be universally helpful. But I also see it being used a lot to triage non-emergency calls and kind of shunt those off of dispatchers so they aren't bothered. In our neck of the woods, that's not usually an issue. It wouldn't be saving them any time because they don't get an insurmountable amount of calls anyway, with the rare exceptions. Obviously, with the floods we had last year, that could have played a part, that could help them out a little bit. But by and large, that AI component wouldn't necessarily help them out.
Okay.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, interesting. I knew Steve was gonna ask the AI question. I had it on
Oh yeah,
on the list, but
I knew it was coming up.
yeah. All right, I love it. Okay. So this is out of curiosity, Nick, but, like, what does your day-to-day look like? Like, managing the GIS component and, like you said, kind of figuring out how that needs to adjust over time.
It really depends on the day
Mm,
because, luckily for me, in I guess I should preface this by saying that what I found is that every agency is different.
mhm,
Everybody has different partners, everybody has different responsibilities. I'm fortunate in the sense that, and this may be a conceit, but it all goes through me.
mhm.
All the addressing goes through me, with the exception of Kerrville proper, who takes care of their own addressing. That's not to sound arrogant, but it really does lessen the chances of there being any errors in the GIS data that is provided to dispatch. Luckily for me, I have a great relationship with every agency that provides any kind of data I need, whether it's our appraisal district or our utility companies. The post office actually won't even start delivery to an address unless they come to me first and confirm their address.
Mm,
So I'm very lucky in the sense that it's a manageable system and that I'm more or less solely responsible for doing it. There's one point of failure, for better or worse.
yeah,
Um, that's really the upside of it for me.
yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming you have, uh, I guess GIS network that you're familiar with too. Like, how does that
Sure.
differ between what a Houston would look like in their GIS kind of department, I guess?
It's kind of strange you mentioned that because I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Denton, the Texas NENA conference,
Mhm,
and went to a couple of GIS meetings there and presentations. And most of the agencies that I talk to are larger than we. Um, but in a lot of ways, their workflows are a lot different than mine because they have so many offices with their hands on it.
mm,
They're experiencing or doing things in an entirely different way than I would.
mhm.
For better or worse, that's their workflow. That's the
Right.
way they do things. So on the one hand, I was able to get ideas about additional data to add to my maps when I got home. One was the speed limit on all the roads that I mentioned earlier, and another was mapping all the trails in the area. That was their unique experience, and through me talking to them and having that network of contacts, that was something I could bring home with me.
Mhm,
Maybe I brought up something that maybe they've implemented in their maps. There may be things that we have on ours that they didn't think to put on theirs, like, maybe a drug-free zone or waterways. Who's to say? But maybe they brought something back with them that somebody else had brought up. There really is a very strong GIS network in Texas, and there's a lot of sharing. It's very open. Everybody is very peaceful and sharing. It really is a good group of folks.
yeah, and like you kinda alluded to before, like, it's been very interesting as Steve and I have talked to more public safety leaders and are ingrained in it every day, how much the workflows within these PSAPs vary. It
Oh,
just kinda
sure.
depends, and it's what they've established in the past, and that's just where they're at now, so, I'm always curious to hear how it differs from your perspective, so appreciate you sharing that. Okay, I'm gonna move us into our third theme and on your involvement with Nina, like we mentioned in the intro. So you were appointed to Nina's board of directors as the Southeastern Director in July of 2025. So how did you originally get involved with Nina, and how do you now find yourself in that role?
It's another one of those odd chains of events. When I came over to do GIS at this office, because of the nature of the business, excuse me, it was more an 8 to 5 scenario, weekends off, that kind of situation, as opposed to the night shifts I was doing before. So I could structure my time a lot better. I had always wanted to become an ENP. It had always
Mhm,
been a goal of mine. No matter where I'd been, I've always tried to stay on kind of an onward and upward kind of path. And being an EMP, I thought at the time was going to be the top. I was going to get my EMP, and that's all I needed to be.
mhm,
So once I was able to get into this job, I was able to again structure my time a little bit better and start attending study groups and being able to really hit the books and get my EMP. Well, what good is having a certification if you can't do something with it? So I'd been sitting on this ENP for a couple of months and saw in a NENA email that they were taking applications for membership on the NENA Institute board. And the NENA Institute board are the folks who uh, create and administer the ENP test. They're the ones that write the questions, write the body of knowledge, all that kind of stuff. So I put in for that, and God help them, they accepted me as an at-large member. 7 years later, I was on their board for 7 years, and last national conference in where were we last year? Long Beach. It came up that Cassie Lowry, who was the Southeastern director for the board of directors, she was going to move up to second VP, which left a year left on her term as Southeastern director. And I had never really thought about it. I mean, it had been in the back of my mind, hadn't really thought about it much. But there was a big part of me that wasn't going to forgive myself if I didn't at least put in for it. And again, God help them, they chose me when I put in for it. And the timing was honestly perfect because I was coming to the end of my term on the institute board. There was a little bit of an overlap, but it really just one position flowed into the other.
Yeah.
And even though I'm only doing it for a year, that year will be up in June. They've been, I have learned so much from all the other directors and all the experiences it have given me. They've given me. I would not trade that experience for anything in the world. It's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was about to say it's been fun to chat with board of director people on the board of directors for Nina and to
Oh
hear
yeah.
kind of how their paths differ.
Oh,
And
they're
I
all
know
they're all
so different.
intelligent, they're well spoken,
Mhm.
and they come from all walks.
Yeah,
Nobody's just being pulled out of the same pit. We're all from all over the place, and I believe we work very well together. I would hope
yeah.
they're all getting just as much out of the experience as I have been.
Right. And let me ask, like you come, I guess, from a more technical position. The conversations that we've had with some of the other NENA board of directors folks on staffing, wellness, telecommunicator reclassification, the NG 911 funding part of it. Like, what topics? Like, what are you collectively focusing on, and how do you see like your technical background coming into play that to coming into kind of that conversation? How do you come into it?
Well, you've definitely hit on all the pillars that we as a board and Nina more at large are concerned about. Um, the one that hits close to home for us, and when I say us, I mean our office and Texas in general, is the next gen funding.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to throw any water on it, but we're in a lot of agencies our size are in a similar position in that if we don't receive what we view as a very modest fee increase on wireless fees, our existence as districts are kind of in doubt,
Mhm.
because we received what amounts to an unfunded mandate to become next gen compliant, which
Yeah.
was great, and we received funds on the front end to help do that, but there was no allowance for um, all the recurring costs associated with next gen. And we'll definitely be able to go for a while, absolutely, but without some kind of funding measure put in place, we don't know what'll happen inside a decade. So we
Mhm.
have a very vested interest in that. Not to say that uh, we don't support reclassification or wellness initiatives, anything like that. It's just that is the primary one we're concerned about on almost a daily basis, and
Mhm.
and I'm sure our concerns and situation is not unique.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we were just talking about it before with you attending the 911 Goes to Washington in February. You've attended a couple conferences this spring. You have more to come. Like outside of kind of what we've been discussing, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you're excited to hear more about and learn more about and progress toward?
I'm, and this may sound fairly selfish, but I'm trying to squeeze in as much as I possibly can before my tenure's over in June.
Yeah.
Um, only because I won't say only because because my experience has been so positive for me, and there was a gamble in a sense of me even putting in for the position because I'm not always comfortable speaking in public. I'm not comfortable traveling all the time, all these different components. So by me putting in for that position, it was really taking me out of my comfort zone.
Right.
And thankfully for me, the rewards have been just innumerous. The people I have met, the experiences I've had, and being able to do things like GTW and meet these passionate people who live these things every day, and they take it very seriously, and they study up on it. They're very knowledgeable on it. It's their passion, and it's really made me. I knew there was kind of an expiration date on what I was doing, but it's made me want to carry on even further because it is so important to people. And it doesn't matter if we're just talking the reclassification, but also the wellness or whatever the pillar may currently be. There are people that are so passionate about what we're doing in the 911 sphere that it's infectious. And I would prefer to just keep going in some in some angle. It obviously isn't going to be the board of directors deal anymore, but as long as there's some road I can travel on, I'm gonna stay with it.
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of the what you shared before and your experiences at these PSAPs. You enjoy the community
Oh,
aspect of
absolutely.
it for sure. And feel like what you mentioned before too, in terms of enjoying going to work every day, that plays into the wellness component. Uh,
Well, and the folks that I meet, whether they're board of directors or institute board members or the people that attend the conferences, it's important to remember that by and large, these folks are all volunteers.
Mhm.
They're doing it because they love it and they want to do it and they want to be involved. And that in itself is infectious.
Yeah,
I mean, these are people who are passionate about what they do. How can you be around them and not be inspired in some
right.
way? And it's rare that you find an industry like that where
Yeah.
I guess it kind of goes back to the family thing and makes you want to go to work. I'll be the first to admit I've made friends on these various boards, the institute board and the board of directors that I know I'll still continue friendships with,
Mhm.
probably till the day I shuffle off. I mean, how many other positions, how many other jobs can you have that allow you that kind of friendship?
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I appreciate you sharing about your experience. Like I said, we talked in our back and forth emails, and you're like, "What story do we have to tell here?" And we're like, "Humble beginnings to like national leadership." It's a very
Yeah.
impressive story, and we love hearing them. Like I said, all everyone's stories in the 911 industry are so vastly different.
Well, I mean, come on. If I can be a housekeeper one day, the next day I become a dispatcher, and then be doing this,
Yeah,
if I can do it, anybody can do it. Granted, it took me 30 years to do it. I bet somebody could do it a lot quicker, but if I can do this, anybody can do this.
yeah,
Absolutely.
very powerful. All right, before I start to wrap us up, Steve, do you have any additional questions for Nick?
No, this is all impressive. I love the passion. I think
Yeah.
people need to the general public outside of, PSAPs, police, EMS, fire need to hear about this more. There's such special people that work in this industry, and it's such a difficult industry. I'm glad wellness is starting to take a hold and really be important, and people are building technology around it and giving you guys the right resources. So all awesome. But again, thank you. We love hearing the passion and the stories from everyone. And,
Yeah.
everyone in the country needs people like you, leadership like you. So keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. All right, Nick, before I wrap us up, is there anything that we didn't hit on today, programs, initiatives happening at Kerr, at NENA, that you want to bring awareness to for our listeners?
Oh, you let me talk for so long, and I don't even remember half of what I said. I'm just gonna assume that I touched on everything, and
You got
thank
it.
you, and, nothing specifically I can think of now.
All right. If you think of anything, we'll chat about it at the NENA annual conference
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
in a
have
couple
me on
weeks.
again, I'll be here.
So we'll chat then. All right. Nick, thank you so much for joining us on the Wilmac Wire. For our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Nick or follow along with what he's doing at NENA, you can find Nick on LinkedIn under Nicholas LaMontia. You can learn more about NENA, that's the National Emergency Number Association, through their website, nena.org. And you can also follow them on social media on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Nick, thank you so much for joining us on the Wilmac Wire. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to the Wilmac Wire. If you like today's conversation, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or watch full episodes on our YouTube channel. You can also learn more about Wilmac Technologies and our work in customer interaction technology at wilmactech.com. We'll be back soon with more conversations with the drivers, those shaping our industry and those building right here in Western New York. See you next time.